That brooch belongs to my son. What are you talking about? It's not yours. Madam, please calm down. My son disappeared. That's his brooch. I don't know anything about your son. Enough. That brooch belongs to my son, declared the billionaire. And what she discovered left everyone in shock. Eleanor Beaumont's cry tore through the air on Yorkville Avenue like a gunshot. Passersby stopped, bodyguards reacted, and Liam Davies, who at that moment was just trying to survive another Tuesday, understood nothing of what was about to happen to him. It was 11 a.m. when the black limousine of the Beaumont family screeched to a halt in front of the Hazelton Hotel. Eleanor, 72 years old, owner of a real estate consortium valued at over $4 billion Canadian dollars. She was reclining in the back seat, reviewing documents, when something caught her eye through the tinted glass. It wasn't the smell, nor the movement. It was the glint, a small, round brooch with a central ruby stone surrounded by hand-worked silver filigree. A brooch she herself had commissioned from jeweler Charles Fournier in his Yorkville workshop exactly 8 years ago. A brooch designed once for one person, her son, Alexander. And now that brooch was pinned to the ragged chest of a homeless man. The man was young, no more than 30, though it was hard to tell for sure because time on the streets ages differently, hardening the skin, dimming the eyes, hunching the shoulders inward, as if the body were trying to make itself invisible. He had tangled dark hair, a week's growth of beard, rough hands scarred with old scabs. He wore jeans ripped at both knees, a black jacket with a torn right sleeve, and dragged a black plastic bag full of cans and cardboard. He walked slowly, with that heavy, resigned cadence of one who isn't in a hurry because there's nowhere to go. And right in the center of his chest, against his grimy jacket, shone that impossible jewel. "Stop him!" Eleanor cried again, and this time her voice trembled in a way her employees had never heard. It wasn't anger, it was something older, deeper. It was the sound a mother makes when something she believed dead suddenly stirs again. Liam stopped, not because he understood what was happening, but because suddenly 3 burly men in dark suits, with discreet earpieces, were blocking his path. One extended an arm without a word. The message was clear. "Hey, I didn't do anything," Liam said, his voice hoarse, raspy, like sandpaper. He instinctively raised his hands, the black bag dangling from one fist. "What's the problem?" There was no answer. The 3 bodyguards simply surrounded him. The limousine door opened, and Eleanor stepped out without waiting for anyone to offer a hand. She wore a beige pantsuit, pearl earrings. Her white hair was pulled back into an immaculate bun. She walked toward Liam with short but firm steps, as if her heels on the asphalt were nails sinking into the earth. Her dark honey eyes, behind tortoiseshell glasses, never left the brooch. 2 steps away, she stopped. She looked at his face. He looked at hers. Neither spoke for a moment that felt far longer than it was. "That brooch," Eleanor said in a low voice, with a calm that was more frightening than shouting. "Where did you get it?" Liam frowned. He looked down at the brooch, as if seeing it for the first time. In a way, he always did. It was one of those things you carry without asking too many questions about why you found it. It was pretty. He'd pinned it to his jacket because it gave him a vague, foolish feeling that it protected him. "I found it," he said. "Where?" "In the garbage." Eleanor closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them again, there was something different in them. A decision. "Get him in the car," she ordered, without looking at her bodyguards. "Madam, are you sure?" I said. "Get him in the car." Liam took a step back. His street instincts, honed over years of survival, told him nothing good could come from getting into a rich woman's vehicle when she looked at him as if he were a ghost. "I'm not going anywhere with you," he said. "I didn't do anything wrong. If you want to call the police, call them." "I won't call the police," Eleanor said. "I just want you to tell me where you got that." She pointed at the brooch with a trembling index finger. "Please." It was that please that disarmed him. It wasn't the tone of someone giving an order. It was the tone of someone who had been pleading for years with someone who couldn't hear her. Liam wasn't a bad person. He was a man who had fallen very low, who had lost too much, who distrusted the world for reasons he didn't quite understand himself, but that please cut through him in a way he hadn't expected. "All right," he said at last, "but I didn't break into anywhere or steal anything from anyone. I want that to be clear." "It's clear," Eleanor replied. The other man traveling with her, Julian, 42, slender, with a tight jaw and eyes that calculated everything with the coldness of a cash register, observed the scene from a few feet back without moving. His hands were in his suit pockets. His expression was unreadably neutral, but his knuckles inside those pockets were completely white. No one noticed. The limousine pulled away 15 minutes later, with Liam in the back seat, smelling of the street and defeat, watching through the window as the city receded from the world he belonged to. The black bag with his cans had been left on the sidewalk. No one picked it up. Eleanor didn't speak to him during the ride. She only stared at the brooch. Her hands, crossed in her lap, couldn't keep still. Her fingers intertwined and unlaced, tightened and loosened, as if searching for something to grasp. Liam didn't know where they were taking him. He didn't know who this woman was. He didn't know why a piece of metal with a red stone could provoke such a reaction in a person. What he did know, with that dark certainty that sometimes arrives before thought, was that his life had just changed. He didn't yet know if for better or worse. The limousine drove through downtown, then ascended towards Forest Hill. The houses grew larger, the gardens quieter, the fences taller. The world Liam had belonged to, if he had ever truly belonged to any world, was left behind, mixed with the smog and noise of the city center. Julian, seated opposite him, watched him with an expression Liam couldn't decipher. It wasn't curiosity, nor sympathy. It was something akin to the assessment a man makes when sizing up another, deciding whether or not he poses a threat. "What's your name?" Julian asked. "Liam." "Liam what?" "Just Liam." Julian nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. He looked out his window again. He asked no more questions. Eleanor said nothing either. She just kept looking at the brooch, and the brooch continued to shine, indifferent to everything, with that dark ruby at its center that seemed to hold within it, like an ember, a secret no one was yet ready to hear. The Beaumont mansion was located on Bridle Path, behind a 4-meter-high gray stone wall, crowned with neatly trimmed ivy. From the outside, nothing was visible. That was the intention. People with that level of fortune don't need to display what they have. The weight of their presence is felt before crossing any threshold. The electric gate opened silently. The interior garden was enormous, symmetrical, with tall cedars lining both sides of the driveway, and a pair of fountains murmuring with that constant, elegant sound, found only in homes where silence can be afforded. Liam stepped out of the limousine and looked up. The house's facade was 3 stories, modern colonial style, with wide windows and wrought iron balconies. It wasn't ostentatious in a vulgar way. It was powerfully serene, which is the worst kind of power, because it needs no justification. A butler, about 50, approached, looking at Liam with trained discretion that didn't entirely conceal his discomfort. "Madam Eleanor, shall I prepare the main drawing room?" "The library," she replied, "and bring water and something to eat." The butler nodded. He cast one last glance at Liam, at his torn shoes, his grimy jacket, at the brooch still shining on his chest like a traffic sign in the middle of the night, and walked back into the house without another word. Liam didn't move immediately. He looked at the gate that was already closing behind him, calculated distances, calculated probabilities, then took a deep breath and moved forward, because at some point in his life he had learned that fleeing the unknown isn't always the smartest thing, and that sometimes the real danger isn't in the direction fear points. What he couldn't know yet was that he was right. The real danger was right behind him, walking in silence, hands in his pockets, knuckles still white. The interrogation. The Beaumont family library was a room that smelled of old wood and well-inherited money. The walls were covered with floor-to-ceiling shelves, holding books that seemed to have actually been read, some askew, others with split spines, several with paper markers peeking between the pages. There was a mahogany desk in the center, 2 tobacco-colored leather armchairs facing the unlit fireplace, and on the mantelpiece, between silver candelabras, a framed photograph Liam couldn't quite see from where they had seated him. They had given him water, brought him a tray with pastries and fruit. The butler had placed it on the side table without looking at him, with that gesture of someone fulfilling an order they personally disapproved of. Liam ate. There was no point in feigning dignity. He was hungry. He'd been hungry since the previous afternoon. Eleanor entered the library alone 10 minutes later. She had changed her suit jacket for a cream silk blouse and carried a glass of water she didn't touch the entire time that followed. She sat opposite him, crossed her hands on her knees, and looked at him for a long moment without speaking. It was a type of silence Liam recognized. The silence of someone steeling themselves for a question they weren't sure they wanted answered. "How long have you been on the street?" she asked at last. "Years," he said. "I don't know exactly how many. 6, maybe more." "Do you have family?" "Not that I know of," Eleanor blinked. It was a strange answer. Not no, I don't, but not that I know of. The difference was small, but she caught it immediately. "What does that mean?" Liam left the half-eaten pastry on the tray. He looked at his own hands for a moment, as if the answer were written there between the scars and the grime under his fingernails. "It means I don't remember," he said. "I woke up on a beach near Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia, without knowing how I got there, without documents, without knowing my last name, without knowing where I was from. The first few weeks, I thought it was temporary, that my memory would just come back, but it didn't, or it came back in fragments that didn't always fit." He paused. "There are things I know. I can speak, I can read, I know the names of cities on a map, but I don't know who I was before that beach." Eleanor listened without moving. Her lips were slightly parted, and her eyes wide, like someone receiving information that the body processes faster than the mind. "And the brooch?" she asked, her voice dropping almost to a whisper. "I found it in a dumpster near the port. Must have been 3 years after I woke up on the beach, maybe 4. It was tangled in some fabric among garbage bags. I cleaned it and kept it." He shrugged. "It looked nice, and it made me feel, I don't know, something. I don't know what. Something like what?" Liam looked at her. It was a strange question, not one someone who just wanted a jewel back would ask. "Like it was mine," he said. "Like it had always been mine." A pause. "I know it sounds ridiculous. A homeless man saying an expensive jewel was always his. But you asked." Eleanor gripped the glass of water with both hands. At that moment, the library door opened, and Julian entered. He didn't knock. He never did. That was one of his ways of silently but constantly reminding everyone that he considered this house to belong to him as much as to anyone else. "May I know what's going on here?" he asked. His tone was that of someone who already knew the answer, and was only asking to formally register his disagreement. "We are talking," Eleanor said without turning to look at him. "I see." Julian entered the room and stood behind his mother's armchair, arms crossed, looking at Liam with an expression anyone from the street would immediately recognize. The look of someone assessing him as a threat. "Have you asked him where he stole the brooch?" "I didn't steal it," Liam said, his voice unwavering. "Of course not," Julian said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Homeless people always find $50,000 jewels in the garbage. It happens all the time." "Julian," Eleanor said, and in that 2-syllable name was a complete warning. "Mom, let's be realistic. This man shows up with Alexander's brooch and says he found it. That's not a story. It's an alibi. The difference is important." "The difference," Liam said calmly, "is that I have no reason to lie to you. I don't know who you are. I don't know who she is. I don't know who Alexander is. I was just walking, and suddenly there were 3 men stopping me in the street." Julian looked at him for a long moment, then turned back to his mother. "Have you told him who Alexander is yet?" "Not yet." "Good, because before we do that, I think we should call the police and check if this individual has a record. If he stole something, if there's a complaint for—" "We are not calling the police." "Julian," I said no. This time, Eleanor did turn to look at him, and in her eyes was something Julian knew well, and which usually stopped him. The absolute will of a woman who had been making decisions for over 40 years, without asking anyone's permission. "I will talk to him, I will listen to him, and then I will decide what's next. You can stay, or you can leave, but you will not interrupt me again." Julian uncrossed his arms. He nodded with that calculated slowness of someone who yields in form, but not in substance. He went to the armchair on the other side of the fireplace and sat down, always watching Liam with the calm, dangerous expression of an animal that has decided to wait. Liam noticed, and decided not to show that he had. "Who is Alexander?" he asked, turning to Eleanor. She paused for a moment, then stood and went to the fireplace mantel. She picked up the framed photograph there, held it with both hands for a few seconds, looking at it, then turned it toward Liam. It was a picture of a young man. He would have been about 27 or 28 inches, the image, smiling, dark-haired, with light, hazel eyes that contrasted with his darker complexion. He stood in front of what looked like a sprawling estate with the sea in the background, wearing a white linen shirt with rolled-up sleeves. He looked happy in a way that only those who don't yet know that happiness ends can be. And in the pocket of that white shirt, barely visible in the corner of the photo, was a ruby brooch. Liam looked at the photograph, looked at it for a long time. Something happened on his face that he himself couldn't have described. It wasn't recognition, exactly. It wasn't the clear, cinematic moment where everything suddenly returns. It was something more unsettling. It was the feeling of looking into a broken mirror where some parts of the image fit and others simply aren't there. The eyes of the young man in the photo, the angle of the jaw, the way he held his body slightly askew with his weight on his left leg. "Who is he?" he asked again, but now his voice had a different texture. My son, Eleanor said. Alexander Beaumont died 5 years ago in a road accident. His car fell into the sea near Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia. We never recovered the body. The silence that followed was so dense that Liam felt it physically, like pressure in his chest. Peggy's Cove, he repeated. Peggy's Cove, Eleanor confirmed. Neither said anything more for a moment. They didn't need to. The words had said enough, and the silence was saying the rest. Julian, from his armchair, watched them both. His expression hadn't changed. His hands rested on the armrests with a perfect, almost artificial stillness, like the stillness of someone who has long practiced appearing calm. This proves nothing, he said at last in a soft voice. A geographic coincidence isn't proof of identity. No one said it proves anything, Eleanor replied without looking at him. I just want us all to be realistic. He rose from the armchair, adjusted his suit jacket with that precise, habitual gesture. If you want to know more about him, the correct thing to do is a formal verification, documents, background checks, a medical review, not a coffee shop conversation. You're right, Eleanor said. We'll do all of that starting tomorrow. Julian nodded. He gave Liam one more quick inventory glance, the kind he'd given him twice already. Then he left the library without saying goodbye. Liam continued to look at the photograph. Can I look at it a moment longer? He asked. Eleanor, who had been tough her whole life because she hadn't been given another option, felt something loosen inside her that hadn't opened in years. You can keep it tonight, she said. If you want. Liam didn't reply. He just kept looking into the hazel eyes of the young man in the photo, searching in that broken reflection for something that had a name, something that had a shape, something that resembled, even a little, the answer to who he had been before waking up on that beach, without a past and without a name. Outside, in the marble corridor, Julian took his phone from his pocket. He dialed a number not saved in his contacts. He waited through the rings. We have a problem, he said softly. I need you to make some calls tonight. And he hung up before anyone in the library could hear him. The unexpected ally. High Park dawned with a low fog. Liam arrived 20 minutes before 8 a.m. He sat on a bench facing the fountain, with his back to the trees, his gaze scanning the park's 2 main entrances. An old habit of someone who sleeps outdoors, always facing where danger might come from. Grace Harrison arrived exactly at 8 a.m., alone, as she had promised, without a chauffeur, without a large bag, wearing a gray coat that made her look like any elderly woman out for an early walk. Only those who knew her closely would notice the stiffness in her shoulders, the way her eyes surveyed the park before she sat down. Thank you for coming, she said. You summoned me, Liam replied. Could you have not come? I could have. Grace looked at the fountain for a moment. The water fell silently, too calm for the weight she carried. Last night, Arthur spent 2 hours in the living room, trying to convince me you're a fraudster. She said it bluntly, as if naming it lightened something. He brought a folder, police records, dates, a complete argument, and I listened to him until the end. She paused, and when he finished, I asked him why Leo was still following you if he was so sure you weren't anyone important. Liam said nothing. He didn't know how to respond. Grace turned her head to him. Arthur always knows how to respond. He's had 45 years of practice. When he doesn't know, it's because I caught him by surprise. And if I caught him by surprise with that question, it's because Leo shouldn't be there. Who's Leo? A man who's done dirty work for many years. I used him once for something I'm not proud of. Arthur uses him more often. She looked at the fountain again. What worries me this morning isn't Leo. It's that Arthur already knows I went to the lab with you. Or he suspects, and if he suspects, he's already acted. Liam thought of the technician in the white coat, the kind face, the carefully filled out form. There's something I didn't tell you yesterday, Grace said suddenly. What? The document from St. Joseph's Health Center didn't arrive alone. It came with a letter. She pulled a folded envelope from the inside pocket of her coat and placed it on Liam's knees. I never knew who sent it, but the letter says something I couldn't tell you yesterday because I didn't know if I could trust you yet. Liam opened the envelope. The letter was short, 2 paragraphs in tight handwriting, unsigned, on plain white paper. Patient file 0447196 was transferred to Maplewood Psychiatric Hospital on the 3rd of November 1996. Admitted without a name, without registered family, with severe amnesia secondary to cranial trauma. He was hospitalized for 4 years. Upon discharge in 2000, he was handed over to a social assistance institution in North York. Liam stopped reading. North York, St. Michael's Children's Home, North York. Keep reading, Grace said very softly. Liam's eyes dropped to the second paragraph. The child born at St. Joseph's Health Center on the 15th of October 1996, son of the unidentified patient, was registered as an abandoned child and transferred to St. Michael's Children's Home, North York, in January 1997. If you are looking for Raphael Harrison, do not look for the man, look for the child he left behind. Liam held the letter, unmoving. The park remained the same, the trees, the fog, the sound of the water. A dog crossed in the distance, tugging its leash, everything the same, and yet, a son, Liam said. His voice came out strange, as if from somewhere else. Raphael had a son before he died, or before he became unconscious, according to this. Grace held her hands together in her lap, knuckles white again. A child born the same day he was admitted to the hospital, who went to North York, who arrived at 3 years old because he spent his first years with his father, before his father was discharged. She stopped. Liam looked up. They looked at each other. No, Liam said. The date matches. It can't be. 3 years in the psychiatric institution, missing in 2000. Grace counted aloud, slowly. A 3-year-old child in an orphanage in North York in 2000. A child who doesn't have a complete file, who doesn't have a family name, who has a pendant put around his neck at some point, and no one knows where it came from. Mrs. Harrison, Liam said. That would mean I'm the grandson you never knew existed. The silence that followed was different from all the previous ones. It wasn't the silence of shock or fear. It was the silence of something enormous, landing without a sound, like those things that are too large to make noise. Liam stood up, not to leave, but because sitting, he couldn't contain himself. At that moment, he walked 3 steps toward the fountain, stopped, and turned back. If this is true, he said, Arthur knows. Yes, Arthur knows his brother didn't die, that he had a son, that this son ended up in an orphanage, and that child is here now. Yes. And yet, he never looked for Raphael. No, not for the child either. No. Liam squeezed the pendant through his shirt fabric. Where is my father? Grace took a moment to answer. I don't know that. The trail goes cold in 2000, when he was discharged. After that, nothing. No records, no address, no name. A man without identity who left a hospital and disappeared in a city of 20 million people. Or he was made to disappear, or that. Liam sat down again, looked at his hands, the hands of someone who had lived on the street, who knew how to clean wounds without a mirror, who knew which benches were safe and which weren't. The hands of no one, the hands of someone who might be the grandson of one of the richest families in the country. I need that DNA result, he said. I know, that's why I came. Liam looked up. Grace reached into her pocket and pulled out a card. This woman's name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. She's a medical geneticist, and she's been carrying something too heavy for 28 years. Grace placed the card in his hand. She worked at St. Joseph's Health Center in 1996. She was on duty the night the nameless patient was admitted. Liam looked at the card. Why didn't she speak up before? Because she was afraid. Because they told her if she spoke, she'd lose her license, her job, everything. Grace looked at him. Because someone very powerful made sure she didn't speak. Arthur? I don't know for sure, but I do know she's been carrying that fear for years, and when I sent her a message yesterday, she replied in 10 minutes. Liam held the card. Why now? Because it's you, Grace said simply. Why did you appear? Because she's also been waiting 28 years for someone to appear so she could speak. A man entered the park from the north access, middle-aged, casual clothes, a newspaper under his arm. Liam registered him without moving his head. He walked to a distant bench, sat down, opened the newspaper. It wasn't Leo, but it could be someone from Leo. I have to go, Liam said. I know. Grace stood with him. Go see her today. She has something saved that she never handed over. Something physical, not just words. What kind of something? She didn't tell me. She just said that when the time came, the person who needed to have it would know. Liam put the card in his shirt's inner pocket next to the pendant. Mrs. Harrison, Liam said, Grace, do you trust me? The woman looked at him for a long moment, not with doubt, but with that look of someone confirming something she had already decided. I trust the pendant, she said, and the scar, and the way you stood up when I told you, which is exactly how Raphael would stand up when something hit him. Liam didn't know what to say, said nothing, turned and left the park through the south access, without hurrying, without running, but with something different on his shoulders that he hadn't had before that morning. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was something more dangerous than that. It was a reason, Dr. Evelyn Reed lived in an apartment in Leslieville, 3rd floor. Windows overlooked an inner courtyard with an old maple tree. Liam arrived at 11 a.m. with the card in his hand, and his heart doing something strange in his chest that he couldn't classify. He rang the doorbell, heard footsteps, a lock. The door opened, just a crack, on a chain. A woman in her 60s, short hair, round glasses, with the face of someone who hadn't slept well in a long time, looked at him through the gap. "I'm Liam," he said. The woman looked him up and down, unlatched the chain, opened the door. "I knew you'd come," she said. Her voice barely trembled. "I've been waiting for you for 28 years. The first confrontation. Dr. Evelyn Reed's apartment smelled of old coffee and paper, stacked boxes, hand-labeled folders on the floor. A library built on the fear that throwing something away meant discarding the only proof she wasn't crazy. Evelyn poured 2 cups without asking and sat opposite him by the courtyard window. "I was 28 inches, 1,996, she said without preamble. "I'd been working in the ER at St. Joseph's Health Center for 6 months. It was my first real job after residency." She picked up the coffee without drinking. "On October 15th, I had the night shift. At 2 a.m., an unidentified man was admitted, unconscious, with severe head trauma and extensive burns. We classified him as John Doe. I opened the file. We stabilized him. Was there anything to identify him? Nothing. No wallet, no papers, no clothing with anything stitched on, just burns and wounds." Evelyn put down the cup, but there was something else. Something I didn't put in the official file because that same night I was told not to. Liam waited. He was wearing a pendant, a silver chain with a red stone. We removed it to clean the burns on his neck, and I put it in an evidence bag, by protocol. She paused. 3 days later, someone entered the storage area and took it. The access log was erased. Liam's hand went to his chest, to the pendant beneath his shirt, and the man was in intensive care for 2 weeks. When he regained consciousness, he remembered nothing. Name, family, history, nothing. The trauma had erased everything. Psychiatrists evaluated him and transferred him to Maplewood Psychiatric Hospital. Evelyn looked at him. 2 weeks after he was transferred, a man came to the ER asking about the unidentified patient. He said he was family. He wanted to know where he had been sent. What was he like? Young, 40 or so, dark suit, square jaw. He spoke with that calm assurance of someone used to getting answers. Evelyn lowered her voice. "I described him to Grace 3 years ago when she contacted me, and she said he sounded like a younger Arthur Harrison." Liam felt the familiar cold in his chest. "What did you give him?" "Nothing. At that time, we weren't authorized to give patient information to anyone who wasn't a verified direct family member. The doctor who treated him was firm." The man left. Evelyn finally took a long drink of her coffee. 2 weeks later, that doctor lost his license due to an anonymous complaint of malpractice. The investigation lasted 2 years and ultimately failed, but the damage was already done. Silence. "What did you keep?" Liam asked. Evelyn looked at him. "Grace said you had something physical." The doctor stood without a word, went to the back room. Liam heard the rustle of a box, then another, then footsteps returning. Evelyn placed a sealed plastic bag, the kind used in medical procedures, on the table, with a label written in ink that time had yellowed. Inside was a folded manila envelope. "I kept it that night," Evelyn said before they came to review. The man had marks on his right wrist, as if from a bracelet or band that had burned with him. "Among the remains, I found this." Liam carefully opened the bag. He opened the envelope. Inside was a small photograph, burned at the edges, the image almost lost, but not entirely. A photo of 2 young people, a man and a woman. She was pregnant, he had his arm around her shoulder, smiling with the sun in the background and a street that could be any street in any city. The man had the pendant around his neck, the red stone visible even in a photo of that size. Liam held the photo with both hands. "The pregnant woman," he said, in that strange voice from before. "She's your mother," Evelyn said. "Or that's what I always believed. A young woman who was with him when whatever happened, happened. She never appeared to claim him. No one ever asked about her." Liam looked at the image as much as he could. The man's face was unrecognizable, too small and too burned, but the pendant was unmistakable. He carefully folded the photo, put it back in the envelope, closed the bag. "I need to take this with me. That's what I saved it for." He stood up. Evelyn did too. "There's something else you need to know," the doctor said before he reached the door. Liam stopped. "Yesterday afternoon, a man came to the clinic where I work now. He said he was a new patient. He asked strange questions, things that had nothing to do with medicine. He wanted to know if I had work files from the 90s. Evelyn hugged herself slightly. It's not the first time someone like that has been sent to me, but this time I was more scared than others. Why more this time? Because this time I know you exist. Her eyes behind the glasses held something that wasn't exactly fear, but the adult version of fear, the one that knows the danger is real and can no longer be ignored. What I have is yours, but once you have it, I no longer have anything to protect me. Liam looked at her for a moment. Do you have somewhere to go? Family? Friends? Someone you can stay with for a few days? A sister in Montreal? Go today. Evelyn nodded slowly. I was already thinking about it. Liam put the sealed bag inside his coat and walked out into the hallway. He had the photo, the letter, and the document. Without the DNA, but with something Arthur didn't know existed. He had to use it before it was taken from him. The meeting. The meeting happened that same afternoon. It wasn't planned. It was inevitable. Liam arrived at the Harrison mansion at 5 p.m. without announcing himself. And this time, the gate opened because Grace was expecting him, even though he hadn't told her he was coming. She led him into the main living room, the large one, with portraits and dark furniture, and the late afternoon light entering diagonally through the windows. Arthur awaited him, seated on the other side of a small table, as calm as ever, as if he had calculated exactly that this would happen today, and had arrived early to be settled when the other arrived. Liam, he said, as if they had known each other their whole lives. Arthur, Liam replied in the same tone. Grace stood between the two. Well, she said, since you're both here, we'll talk here. Arthur crossed his arms. Liam remained standing. I found something, Liam said directly. What a surprise, Arthur replied. A photo of a young man with this pendant. Liam pulled it from beneath his shirt, visible without taking it off. A photo that was in the possession of a doctor from Street, Joseph's Health Center, who treated an unidentified patient on the night of the 15th of October 1996, one day after Raphael Harrison's accident. The name Raphael on his lips sounded different than before. Both noticed it. Arthur didn't move. That proves nothing. That patient's file was transferred and then erased. The doctor who treated him has been keeping copies for 28 years because someone made it clear to her that speaking had consequences. Liam stared at him. The doctor who refused to give information that month lost his license 2 weeks later. Doctors lose licenses for negligence. It has nothing to do with Arthur. Grace's voice was flat and absolute. Both fell silent. Did you know Raphael survived the accident? Silence. The first Arthur didn't immediately fill. 1 second, 2, 3. No, he said. Grace looked at him with an expression Liam couldn't quite read, but which held something of a mother who had known her son for 45 years and knew exactly when he was lying. I don't believe you, she simply said. Arthur stood up. Mom, this man arrived 4 days ago from the street with a pendant and has already managed to convince you that your dead son survived, that he had a secret child, and that I'm responsible for everything. His voice was still controlled, but something at the edges was starting to crack. Doesn't that seem a little too perfect? What seems to me, Grace said, is that when I asked if you knew Raphael survived, you took 3 seconds to say no. I was processing the question. You've been processing questions in less than a second for 45 years, Arthur. Arthur and his mother looked at each other. Liam said nothing. It was a moment when words were superfluous. I want a meeting with the family lawyer tomorrow, Arthur finally said with both of them present. And I want this man to bring all the evidence he claims to have, with a verifiable chain of custody, or it has no legal value. Agreed, Liam said. Arthur looked at him. That look lasted only briefly, less than 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, Liam read something that needed no translation. You won't make it to that meeting. Tomorrow at 10, Arthur said, and left the room. His footsteps echoed on the marble of the foyer, then on the staircase, then nothing. Grace sat in the nearest armchair, as if her legs had suddenly given out. Liam approached her. Are you okay? She asked. And it was the first time she said it without protection. I've spent 28 years thinking my son was dead. And now I have to accept that perhaps he wasn't, and that someone in this house knew it. Liam didn't know what to say. He gently placed his hand on hers, without speaking. Grace let it stay there. Outside, Arthur's car started. It drove away calmly, without speeding, without haste. That was the most dangerous thing of all. Everything crumbles. The meeting with the lawyer never happened. At 7 a.m., 2 hours before the appointment, Liam received a call from an unrecognized number, a nervous young man's voice. Is this Liam Davies? Yes. This is Mark Jensen from MedGen Labs. A pause. Agitated breathing. I need you to know what happened. They offered me money to destroy your sample and erase the file. I accepted, but then I couldn't. Another pause. The analysis does exist. I saved it to an external server before deleting it from the system. I have a copy. Liam gripped the phone. Where are you? At home, but I'm afraid to stay here. The man who contacted me wasn't just anyone. He had information about my family, my debt, things no one should know that quickly. I need that result. I know, that's why I called, but I need you to guarantee that if I hand this over, someone will protect me. I can't guarantee that. Liam's voice was firm, but not cruel. What I can guarantee is that if you don't hand it over, you're the only one who stands to lose. Silence. All right, Mark said at last. There's a coffee shop at Queen Street West and Spadina Avenue. 1 hour. The line disconnected. Liam dressed quickly and left. He didn't make it to the coffee shop. 2 blocks from the meeting point, 2 men intercepted him on a side street. They didn't pull out weapons, didn't say anything threatening, just positioned themselves on either side. And the larger one placed a hand on his shoulder with a specific pressure that left no options. Come with us, he said. They led him to a black SUV parked illegally. They put him in the back. The journey lasted 20 silent minutes. When the SUV stopped, Liam recognized the area. The Kingsway, large houses with high walls, the kind of neighborhood where neighbors learn to hear nothing. They led him into an office in the basement of a house that had no outward sign of its purpose. Arthur awaited him, seated on the other side of a small table, with no visible bodyguards and 2 cups of coffee. Sit, he said. Liam remained standing. As you wish. Arthur picked up his cup. I'm not going to hit you if that's what you're thinking. I'm a businessman, not a movie villain. Why did you bring me here? To talk without my mother present. Arthur put down the cup. Just you and I, no performances. What kind of conversation? An honest one, the kind you don't have in front of lawyers. He leaned back in his chair. I know what you found. The photo, the document, the doctor. I know Evelyn Reed has already left for Montreal, and I know a lab technician is about to hand you a DNA analysis. Liam didn't blink. How much do you want? Arthur asked. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Pardon? Money. How much do you need to disappear and not come back? The voice was completely practical, as if closing a supply contract. I'm not insulting you. I'm being honest. You have something of value, and I'm willing to buy it. Name a number. Liam looked at him. It doesn't have a number. Everything has a number. You know that Raphael Harrison survived the accident. Arthur didn't reply. You went to the hospital. You asked about him. And when they didn't give you information, you made sure the doctor paid the price. Liam spoke slowly, without raising his voice. You left your brother in a psychiatric hospital, nameless, familyless, with nothing. And when he was discharged, you let him disappear into the city because it was more convenient for him to be dead. That's a very serious accusation, without verifiable proof. I have the photo, I have the documents, I have the testimony of a direct witness. A witness who hasn't spoken for 28 years because she knows what she says has no legal value without corroboration. Arthur stood up. He no longer held his previous relaxed pose. Listen closely. Liam, I don't know who you are. You might be my mother's grandson, you might not. But right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you're either going to leave this city with enough money so you never have to sleep on a bench again, or you're going to leave with nothing because what you think you have is going to disappear, just like the hospital file disappeared. Arthur looked at him. Like things that shouldn't exist, disappear. Liam held his gaze without moving. I'm not leaving, he said. Arthur nodded once, slowly, like someone accepting the outcome of a calculated bet. Then, so be it. The 2 men from before led him out of the house with the same efficiency with which they had brought him in. They left him on the street 6 blocks away. The SUV drove off. Liam took out his phone and called Mark Jensen. No answer. He called 3 more times. Nothing. What happened in the next 48 hours was swift and systematic, with the precision of someone who has enough resources to move many pieces at once. First, the analysis disappeared. Mark Jensen deleted the external server and stopped answering calls. Liam went to the lab, and they told him the technician had resigned that morning. No file under Liam Davies' name existed in the system. Then came the newspapers. Not all of them, just 2, the most widely circulated in the city, the ones people read on the subway, in barbershops, and in company lunchrooms. In the police section, a 3-paragraph note with a stock photo, Liam Davies, 31, no fixed address, arrested in 2021 for theft in a public market, investigated in 2023 for alleged senior fraud in Parkdale, currently linked to a new complaint for attempted fraud against a prominent Toronto business family. The note didn't name the family. It didn't need to. Liam read the note at a newspaper stand on Queen Street West and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Shame. Not for what the note said, but for what it would do to Grace. What, the note said. He called Grace. 5 rings. Voicemail. He called twice more. Nothing. He went to the mansion. The gate didn't open. The intercom didn't respond. He stood on the grey stone sidewalk in front of the wall and understood that Arthur had executed exactly what he said he would do. Not with violence, without violence, just with money and contacts. And the patience of someone who knows that time works for the one with more to lose. At 3 p.m., he received a short message from Grace, without punctuation. Need time, don't come. Liam read the message 4 times, saved it, and walked. That night he slept on the same median on Queen Street West where he had slept before all this began. The old blanket, the sick orange sky, the never-ending city noise. All the same, as if the past few days had been an interruption, and now the world was returning to its natural position. He took out the pendant and looked at it in the darkness. Without light, the red stone didn't shine. It was just an opaque stone on a silver chain that needed polishing. He thought of the burned photo, the unrecognizable face of the young man, the pregnant woman beside him who never came to look for him. He thought of a 3-year-old child in an orphanage in North York who arrived with a pendant and no name and no one to ask about him. He thought of Arthur, who knew everything from the beginning and chose silence because silence gave him an empire. And he thought of Grace, who had said, "Don't come," with a coolness that wasn't indifference, but the kind of wound that protects itself by hardening. At 2 a.m., he picked up his phone and wrote a message to a number he had saved without quite knowing why. Dr. Reed, it's Liam. I lost everything. The sample, the witnesses, access to Grace. I only have the photo and the physical documents you gave me. I need to know if there's anything else you didn't tell me. He waited. 10 minutes later, the reply came, "There's something else. I recorded everything. For the past 3 years. Every time someone sent a strange person to my clinic, I turned on a recorder. I have names, dates, conversations. I saved it in a place that's not my home or my clinic." Liam sat on the bench. "Why didn't you tell me before?" The answer took longer this time. "Because if I told you before and they caught you, you'd lose it. I waited for you to lose everything to give it to you. When you have nothing to lose, you're the hardest to destroy." Liam read that sentence. The one with nothing to lose is the hardest to destroy. He closed his eyes, opened them. "Where are your recordings?" This time the answer was immediate. "In an envelope. Davies and Associates Notary, Bay Street. It's in your name. Liam Davies. You can pick it up tomorrow starting at 9 a.m. Liam put away his phone, looked at the pendant one last time, tucked it under his shirt, and for the first time in 4 days, closed his eyes with something resembling a plan. The devastating truth. The devastating truth. Davies and Associates Notary opened at 9 a.m. Liam arrived at 8:45 a.m. and waited on the opposite sidewalk with his usual method, facing the 2 street entrances, back to the wall, not looking like he was waiting for anything. At 9 sharp, he crossed. The receptionist was young, efficient, with the face of someone who had learned not to ask about the contents of the envelopes she guarded. "Liam Davies," he said. She typed something, nodded, went to a back office, and returned with a thick manila envelope sealed with his name written in blue ink on the front. "Do I need identification?" Liam asked. The lady who deposited it left instructions to deliver it to whoever asked for it by name. She said the person picking it up wouldn't have formal ID. Liam took the envelope, stepped onto the street, and walked 3 blocks before opening it. Inside was a USB drive, 3 handwritten pages with dates and names, and a note from Evelyn Reed in the same tight handwriting as the letter. On the USB are 16 audio recordings. The most important ones are from March 7th and September 22nd of last year. In both, a man identifying himself as a legal representative of the Harrison Corporation offered me money to destroy my file and sign a statement that I had no relevant recollection of the 1996 patient case. I refused on both occasions. In the September 22nd recording, the man explicitly mentions Arthur Harrison's name as authorizing the payment. He doesn't know because the phone was in my lab coat, and he never saw me recording. Be careful. Liam read the note twice. He put everything inside his coat, along with the burned photo and hospital documents. Then he took out his phone and found Grace's number. He didn't call yet. He thought first. Arthur had built his defense on a single basis, that Liam had nothing legally sustainable. The newspaper article, the destroyed DNA, the bought witness, the closed gate. Everything pointed to a fraud that never existed. And if Liam now arrived with a recording where Arthur was mentioned by name, Arthur would claim it was fabricated, that Evelyn Reed was a witness with an agenda, that the chain of custody was contaminated. He needed the recording to reach someone before Arthur knew it existed. Someone who couldn't be bought, or someone whom buying would be too costly, even for Arthur. He thought for 15 minutes, standing at the corner of Bloor Street West and Avenue Road, with the Yorkville traffic passing by as if the world had nothing urgent to resolve. Then he walked to a downtown internet cafe, paid for half an hour, and copied the 16 recordings to 3 different email addresses. One to his own address, he created on the spot, one to the newsroom of a national investigative newspaper he found in 10 seconds, and one to a civil rights law firm he had seen advertised on a billboard weeks ago, and whose name he remembered without knowing why. Then he left the internet cafe and called Grace. This time she answered on the second ring. "Liam?" Her voice sounded different, more tired, older than it had sounded in the park 3 days earlier. "I need to see you today." Arthur showed me the newspaper article. "That article is false. The fraud investigation never existed. You can verify it with the public prosecutor's office. Any lawyer can do it in 20 minutes. Silence. "I know," Grace said. Liam hadn't expected that. "You know, I had it verified yesterday afternoon. My personal lawyer, not Arthur's." A pause. "There are no active or past complaints in your name for that matter." Then I know the note is a lie, and I know Arthur fabricated or bought it." Her voice held no fury, it held something worse. The calm of someone who had finally understood something she didn't want to understand. "That's why I asked for time. Not because I trusted you less, but because I needed to confirm that what I was thinking about my son was true before acting." Liam closed his eyes for a second. "I have the recordings," he said. Long silence. "What recordings?" "Dr. Reed recorded Arthur's envoys for 3 years. In one of them, his name is explicitly mentioned." He paused. "I've already sent them to an investigative newspaper and a civil rights law firm. If Arthur destroys them now, it's too late." The silence that followed was different from all the previous ones in this story. It wasn't the silence of fear, nor shock, nor doubt. It was the silence of a mother who had just lost something that wasn't her dead son, because she had already lost him 28 years ago. It was something else. It was the living version of that son, the version that remained, the son she raised, and who betrayed her, in a way no mother wants to name aloud. "Come," Grace said finally, "but not to the mansion. Arthur is here." "Where?" "My lawyer's office. I'll send you the address." The office was in downtown Toronto, on the 4th floor of a discreet building with no logo on the facade. The lawyer's name was Mr. Thompson, no relation, and he had the face of someone who had spent decades seeing things he couldn't repeat in family settings. Grace was already there when Liam arrived, sitting in front of a large desk with the manila envelope from the park in her hands and an expression that asked for no comfort. Liam handed the USB drive to Mr. Thompson. "The most relevant recordings are from March 7th and September 22nd of last year. In the second, the authoriser's name is mentioned." Mr. Thompson connected the USB to his computer without saying anything. He listened to fragments, took notes. His face didn't change, but his note-taking became faster. "This is sufficient for a formal complaint," he said after 10 minutes. "Sufficient for what exactly?" Grace asked. "For obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and depending on the outcome of a broader investigation, potentially patrimonial fraud, if it's proven that Mr. Arthur Harrison concealed relevant information about his brother's survival to retain an inheritance that legally did not entirely belong to him." The room fell still. Grace wasn't crying. She wasn't trembling. She looked at the desk with the gaze of someone processing a truth she had been walking towards for weeks, and which had now finally arrived. "And Raphael?" she asked softly. "Is there a way to find him?" Mr. Thompson looked at her. "If he survived and was discharged in 2000 with severe amnesia, he may have recovered some memory over time. Or not." He paused. "But with the documents you have, and a court order, we can reopen the Maplewood Psychiatric Hospital file and track his discharge. There's a trail. It's just that someone took care to bury it." Grace nodded. Then she looked at Liam. She looked at him in a way he hadn't seen before. It wasn't the look of a woman searching for her son. It was the look of someone who had found something she wasn't looking for, and which was, in a way, more real than what she was seeking. "The photo," Liam said. He took it from his coat, the sealed bag, the manila envelope, the image burned at the edges. Grace took it with both hands, looked at it slowly, very slowly, and then something happened that Liam hadn't expected. The woman who had crossed an entire avenue without hesitation to confront a homeless man for a pendant. The woman who had disarmed her son with a question in her own living room. The woman who had kept documents for 28 years without giving up. That woman closed her eyes and let 2 tears fall with the same efficiency with which she did everything else. Without sound, without drama, just 2 tears. "It's him," she said. "You can recognize him? The image is very... I don't need to see his face." Grace pointed her finger at the man's figure in the photo. A detail on his right wrist, almost invisible due to the damage to the image. "I gave him that leather bracelet when he turned 18. He wore it until the day of the accident." Liam looked. There it was, a dark leather strand around the man's right wrist, so small he had looked 3 times without seeing it. "Then it's Raphael," he said. "It's my son." Grace folded the photo with the same care Liam had folded it before. "Alive, until at least 2000. And with a son." She looked at him. "With you, Mr. Thompson cleared his throat softly. "To proceed legally, we will need the DNA analysis. I can arrange one with an official chain of custody this very week." "Do it," Grace said, without taking her eyes off Liam. Outside on the street, Liam's phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Recordings reached newsroom. Editor wants to publish tomorrow. Authorize?" Liam looked at the message, then at Grace. "Do I authorize?" he asked her. Grace didn't hesitate. "Authorize." Liam typed a single word, "Yes," and at that moment, on some 22nd floor of a Bay Street high-rise, Arthur Harrison's phone began to ring with calls he wouldn't want to answer. Justice. And the final clause, the article, came out at 6 a.m. the next day, not in print, but digitally, which was worse for those who wanted to control it, because print could be stopped and digital could not. The headline read, "Harrison corporate heir allegedly concealed brother's survival for 28 years, according to recordings." Below, 4 paragraphs, 3 verified anonymous sources, and an excerpt from the September 22nd recording transcribed verbatim, with Arthur Harrison's name on line 14. By 7 a.m., the article had 12,000 reads. By 9 a.m., 80,000. By 11 a.m., the country's main news portals had picked it up. Liam didn't read it in real time. He was at Mr. Thompson's office, signing documents for the formal opening of an investigation, when the lawyer showed him his phone screen with the numbers climbing. Liam looked at the numbers, looked at them without euphoria, without relief. He just looked. "How do you feel?" the lawyer asked him. "Strange," Liam said, and it was the most honest answer he could give. Arthur Harrison issued a statement through his public relations office at 10 a.m. He denied everything. He spoke of a defamation campaign, of fabricated evidence, of an unscrupulous individual who had manipulated his elderly mother. The statement was well written. It was the kind of text that works when there's nothing to contradict it, but there was. At 2 p.m., the civil rights law firm to which Liam had sent the recordings filed a formal complaint with the public prosecutor's office for obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and patrimonial fraud. They attached the USB, the transcriptions, the hospital documents, and Dr. Evelyn Reed's notarized declaration, signed from Montreal that same morning via video conference. At 4 p.m., 2 Crown attorneys arrived at the Bay Street high-rise. Arthur wasn't there. His assistant said Mr. Harrison had gone to a meeting and didn't know when he'd return. Parking lot cameras showed his car had left at 11:42 a.m., an hour after the statement, 40 minutes before the officers arrived. They found him 3 days later, not fleeing, at his Muskoka cottage, the same one he'd had for 20 years, sitting on the terrace with a glass of whiskey, and the same calm expression as always, as if he had calculated that fleeing was worse than waiting, and had chosen to wait with dignity. They arrested him without incident. Liam learned about it from a message from Mr. Thompson while walking through Kensington Market without a fixed destination, as he still did when he needed to think. He read the message, put away his phone, and kept walking. The DNA result arrived 12 days after Mr. Thompson managed the official sample. Liam was alone when he read it in the office, with the sheet in his hands, and the lawyer sitting on the other side of the desk, saying nothing, waiting. The probability of kinship with Grace Harrison was 99.97% in a direct line of grandparent to grandchild. Liam read the number, read it again, carefully folded the sheet, and put it in the inner pocket of his coat next to the burned photo. "Do you want me to call Mrs. Harrison?" the lawyer asked. "No," Liam said. "I'll go." The Harrison mansion had the same facade as always. The grey stone wall, the cameras at the corners, the black iron gate, all the same. This time, the gate opened before he touched the intercom. Grace awaited him in the garden, standing, wearing the same grey coat from the park, not at the entrance, nor in the living room, nor surrounded by expensive furniture, but in the garden, out in the open, as if she had decided this conversation couldn't happen indoors. Liam walked towards her along the stone path. They stopped a meter apart. Neither spoke first. Liam took the sheet from his pocket and handed it to her. Grace took it, read it. Her hands didn't tremble, nor did her eyes blink more than usual. She folded it, handed it back. "I already knew," she said. "Since when?" "Since the park bench, since you told me about the orphanage." A pause. "The paper just confirms what the body already knows." Liam didn't know what to do with that phrase. He kept it. Grace looked at him with that direct gaze he already knew, one that asked no permission to see what it saw. "What do you need?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. It wasn't what he expected. He expected a declaration, an embrace, something more ceremonious. But Grace Harrison wasn't one for ceremonies. She was for direct questions. "I don't know yet," Liam said honestly. "That's all right. You have time." They stood in silence for a moment. The garden smelled of damp earth and those flowers he had never been able to identify. Above, the Toronto sky with its perpetual luminosity that obscures the stars. "Are you going to look for Raphael?" Liam asked. "We've already started. The lawyer has the court order to reopen the Maplewood Psychiatric Hospital file." Grace looked towards the house. If he's still alive, he's 51. He might remember everything. He might not remember anything. He might have built another complete life without knowing who he was. And if he doesn't want to come back? Grace took a moment. "Then he doesn't come back." She said it without drama, with a serenity that wasn't resignation, but something more difficult. Respect. "I won't force anyone to be what they don't want to be. I've wasted too much time wanting people to be what I needed them to be." Liam looked at her. There was something in that sentence that wasn't directed only at Raphael. "I don't know if I can be what you expect either," he said slowly. "I expect nothing," Grace said. "I offer you something. It's different. What do you offer? A name, a history, a place in this family that is yours by right, even if you didn't ask for it." She paused briefly, "and space for you to decide if you want it or not." Liam looked at the garden, the stone path, the black iron gate in the background, the wall that from outside seemed like a border and from inside was just a wall. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "All the time you need." Liam nodded slowly, turned, and walked toward the gate. Grace didn't call him, didn't say anything more. She let him go as you let go of someone who already knows the way back. That night, Liam slept under a roof for the first time in weeks, not in the mansion, but in a small hotel room in Parkdale that cost $300 a night and had a window overlooking an alley and a bed that smelled of cheap detergent. He paid for it with money the lawyer had advanced him as part of the legal process expenses. He lay down with his clothes on. He placed the pendant on the nightstand next to the phone. The red stone in the dark, opaque, real. He thought of the North York orphanage, of the 3-year-old child who arrived nameless and without a history, and learned not to need either. He thought of Evelyn Reed in Montreal, who after 28 years of fear could perhaps finally rest, and of Arthur, who had carried 28 years of lies and who was now in some detention center awaiting a process that would last years and had very few favorable outcomes. And he thought of Raphael Harrison, a 1-year-old man somewhere in this city, or this country, or this world, who perhaps had rebuilt his life from scratch without knowing he had a son who perhaps carried a scar on his left eyebrow and didn't remember where it came from. Or perhaps he did remember. Perhaps he had remembered everything for years and had chosen not to return. Liam picked up the pendant from the nightstand, squeezed it once, released it, and fell asleep with a question that still had no answer. The kind of question that doesn't destroy, but pushes forward. If Raphael Harrison remembered and chose not to seek, what had he found in that nameless life that was worth more than everything he had left behind? It wasn't a question of pain. It was a question of curiosity. And that, Liam thought before sleep took him, was probably the closest thing to peace he had felt in 31 years. What remained? 3 weeks later, a letter arrived, not a message, not a call, a real letter, in a white envelope with handwritten script addressed to Liam Davies, C. O. Mr. Thompson's office, which was the only address Liam had given to anyone other than Grace. The receptionist at the office placed it on the desk without a word. The lawyer saw it arrive but didn't ask. Liam took it, looked at the outside, and put it in his coat without opening it. He opened it 2 hours later, sitting on a bench in High Park. The same park, the same fountain, a different bench. The handwriting was uneven, belonging to someone who wrote slowly, as if unsure of each word, before putting it on paper. Liam, I don't know if it's right to write to you. I've spent 3 weeks trying to decide whether to do it or not, and in the end, I decided not doing it was worse. My name is Raphael. I don't know if that means anything to you, or if it's just a name. For many years, I wasn't called that. I was called Ernest, which was the name given to me by the woman who picked me up off the street in 2002, when I still didn't remember anything, and she needed someone to carry sacks in her small grocery store in Scarborough. I was Ernest for almost 8 years. The memories returned slowly, not suddenly like in movies. First smells, then voices, then names that didn't yet have faces. My mother was the first thing I remembered clearly, the smell of her perfume, the way she said my name when she was angry. Then I remembered Arthur. And when I remembered Arthur, I understood why I hadn't returned. I didn't look for you because I didn't know you existed. I swear it on the only dignity I have left. If I had known there was a child, nothing in this world would have stopped me. Not fear, not Arthur, not the 20 years I spent rebuilding a life from scratch. Nothing. I found out from the newspapers. Like everyone else, I saw your name, I saw the photo they published, and I recognized the pendant before I recognized your face. Your mother put that pendant around your neck the night you were born. Her name was Sarah. Not the Sarah from the family, but another. A woman I met in Muskoka a year before the accident and who disappeared after leaving you at the hospital. I never knew why. I never found her. I've spent 25 years not knowing if she's still alive. You have her way of staying still when something hits you. I saw it in the newspaper photos. That way of absorbing the impact without moving. She did exactly that. I'm not asking for anything. I have no right to ask for anything. I'm a 51-year-old man who lives in Chester, Nova Scotia, who owns a small hardware store that barely makes ends meet, and who carried guilt for decades for things that happened before he could prevent them, and for things he could have prevented and didn't. I just wanted you to know that I exist, that I didn't abandon you on purpose, that the pendant has a story that starts long before you, and yet, it was always meant to reach your hands, even if I never planned it that way. If you ever want to know more, write to me. If you don't want to know anything, that's fine too. I understand it in a way very few people can understand. Raphael. P.S. The leather bracelet in the photo. Your grandmother gave it to me when I turned 18. I wore it until the accident. I don't know how it ended up in the photo they found, but I'm glad it did. Some things find a way to survive everything. Liam folded the letter. He folded it twice carefully, with the same precision with which he had folded the burned photo weeks ago. He put it in the inner pocket of his coat, next to the photo, next to the DNA result. He sat on the bench for an unmeasured time. The pigeon continued walking in circles. The child on the swing asked to be pushed higher. The older man folded his newspaper and stood up with the patience of someone in no hurry to go anywhere. Liam took the pendant from beneath his shirt, held it in his open palm. The red stone in the afternoon sun shone differently than in the dark, with depth, with layers. He thought of all that pendant had carried. A man who loved a woman named Sarah, a doctor who kept everything out of fear for 28 years. A 3-year-old child, without a name, who learned to carry the weight without knowing where it came from. Liam put it back around his neck, stood up, went to see Grace that same afternoon. He didn't call her first, he just went. The gate opened when he pressed the intercom and said his name. He no longer needed to wait. Grace was in the living room with Mr. Thompson and 2 people Liam didn't recognize, probably lawyers for the case against Arthur, which was proceeding slowly, as these things do when there's money on both sides. When she saw him enter, she said something softly to the lawyers, and they gathered their papers with the efficiency of those who understand when a meeting is over. "Sit," Grace said when they were alone. "I have something to show you." Grace looked at him, not at the envelope. She read something on his face before he said anything. "Is it good or bad?" she asked. "I don't know yet," Liam said honestly. "I think it's both at the same time." Grace nodded, as if that were the most reasonable answer he could have given. "Give it to me." Liam handed her the letter. Grace read it. She read it completely, without stopping, without making a sound. Only her eyes moved line by line with that absolute concentration she reserved for things that mattered. When she finished, she didn't fold the letter. She held it open in her hands for a few more seconds, as if needing a little more time with it before returning it to the world. Then she folded it, placed it on the table. "Chester, Nova Scotia," she said. "Yes, a hardware store." "That's what it says." Grace looked out the window. Outside, the garden with the fading afternoon light, the same trees, the same white flowers in the planters that someone had changed every week for decades. "Do you know what this means?" she asked without turning. "That he's alive," Liam said. "That he's alive." Grace repeated the phrase slowly, as if she needed to hear it aloud, to fully believe it. "That my son is alive in Chester, Nova Scotia, with a hardware store, and he's 51, and he chose not to come back, because he was afraid of Arthur. He doesn't have to be afraid of Arthur anymore." "No," Grace turned to him. Her eyes weren't crying. Liam hadn't seen her cry in weeks, and was beginning to understand that it wasn't coldness, but a different way of feeling, deeper, quieter. Are you going to write to him?" "I don't know yet." Liam finally sat down. "I need to think about what I want to say to him. I don't want to write just anything. Take all the time you need." "And you?" Liam asked. "Are you going to write to him?" Grace looked at him for a long moment. "Tonight," she said, and in those two words was something that couldn't fit into longer sentences. A certainty, a quiet urgency. A 70-year-old mother who had just learned her son runs a hardware store in Chester, Nova Scotia, and who had waited long enough. Liam nodded. There was a silence that neither of them broke immediately. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that only exists between people who have been through something together and who know they no longer need to fill it with words. "Liam," Grace said after a moment. "Yes? Have you decided?" He didn't need to ask her what she meant. He had been thinking about it for 3 weeks, ever since the garden, ever since, "What do you need?" and "You have time." He had thought about it in the Parkdale hotel room, and on the park benches, and on his aimless walks through Kensington Market and Queen West and all the places he knew by heart because he had wandered them with nowhere to go. "Not yet," he said. Grace didn't look disappointed. "That's all right, but I think," Liam said slowly, "I want to know what it's like, to have a place, a name, to see how that feels." He paused. "No promises from either of us, just to see." Grace looked at him. Something on her face changed. Not dramatically, just a millimeter at the corner of her lips, at the edge of her eyes, the most restrained version of a smile. "That's enough," she said. That night, Liam didn't sleep in the Parkdale hotel room. He slept in the Harrison mansion, in a second-floor room with a window overlooking the garden, in a bed that smelled of truly clean linen, not cheap detergent. He didn't sleep well immediately. He lay for a while with his eyes open, looking at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the sounds of a house he didn't yet know, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of city traffic, the wind in the garden, rustling something against the window. He placed the pendant on the nightstand, the red stone in the dark, without light, opaque. He thought of the North York orphanage, of the 3-year-old child who arrived nameless and without a history, and who learned not to need either. He thought of Evelyn Reed in Montreal, who after 28 years of fear could perhaps finally rest, and of Arthur, who had carried 28 years of lies, and who was now in some detention center, awaiting a process that would last years and had very few favorable outcomes. And he thought of Raphael Harrison, a 51-year-old man somewhere in this city, or this country, or this world, who perhaps had rebuilt his life from scratch, without knowing he had a son who perhaps carried a scar on his left eyebrow and didn't remember where it came from. Or perhaps he did remember. Perhaps he had remembered everything for years and had chosen not to return. Liam closed his eyes. Before sleep took him, a question crossed the edge of his consciousness. Not distressing, just present, like those questions that don't demand an immediate answer, but settle in and wait. What had Sarah kept all these years? And that, Liam thought before sleep finally reached him, was probably the closest thing to peace he had felt in 31 years.